Hello Epic 7. It's been a while since I've made a Rift video, but I decided now is a good time because I finally reached RC21. And at Rift Controller 21 I get the new Rift Fragment, which allows me to have a very stable one-turn clear. So I want to share this team with you, the stat points required, and alternate units so that you can have a stable way to farm this event too at high efficiency. Now, as with most PvE, there is some RNG to it, but I think my clear rate is about 95% in one turn. So, first things first, at RC21, you get an additional Rift controller. Let's go over the Rift controllers that we have. First is the basic Rift controller for 15% more damage. Then we'll go with the Dimensional Fragment of Cohesion for our Soul Weaver to survive up front. The Fragment of Multiplicity for extra chance of damage, and then of course the Dimensional Fragment of Obscurity to give us 7 additional counter forces, which are your turns in Rift. These 7 extra turns are part of what give us such good stability at RC21. So here is my team. It looks suspiciously like past teams, but bear with me and I'll explain the differences. First we're going to talk about Mascot Hazel. Her stat points are simple. 170 to 190 speed range is fine, and enough bulk to take hits. She'll need 220% effect resistance to prevent the skill cooldowns from reducing your ability to heal. I prefer Idol's Cheer on her to help facilitate damage, but if you find you're struggling with the healing, you may want to consider Prophetic Candlestick to cycle her skills. She does not need nearly as much bulk as shown here, but this lets me use her in other aspects of PvE, such as Nightmare Vera. When it comes to Soul Weavers, there really are no replacements for Mascot Hazel. If you don't have her yet, go farm her SC and get it taken care of. People have tried to run Tamarin in her place, and she just does not bring enough to the table. Next on the list is Haste. I know a lot of people want to replace Haste, but he is very difficult to replace in this. The entire event seems to be written around him. For a stat point, you're going to want 210 to 220 speed. He'll need 95% effectiveness. I know I'm a little short, but it's close enough. Damage is optional, but every little bit helps. You want to take his S1 skill to +3 for the additional chance to defense break. His S2 skill you want to take to +4 for the extra healing bonus. That's actually huge for this fight. And for his S3, of course, you want to take up to +4 for the additional chance for defense break. For an artifact, run him on Prophetic Candlestick to help cycle his skills, most importantly his S2 heal. I know a lot of people were angling for Torn Sleeve or Alabastron for extra debuffs, but trust, you will have plenty of debuffs if you're running Kane as your damage dealer, and those extra artifacts can actually get in the way, blocking your ability to reapply defense break if and when that falls off. Fire Ken is my third pick. He replaces Surin. Fire Ken brings an additional chance to defense break at 100% when he uses his S2, and he also has a defense break on his S1, and his S2 defense break becomes Ignore ER when he has Vigor in place. It makes him a fantastic unit to reapply defense breaks. As for speed, you want Ken around 150 to 155 speed, and this is for 2 reasons. One is it lets you use him in Wyvern, and 2 is it makes sure he goes after Xeon does his attack so he can refresh the defense break. I put him on Warhorn to help boost his cycling and to help the rest of the team deal additional damage. The big advantage to Ken is you don't really need any Molagora in this guy. His S1 I have boosted for additional fighting spirit, and his S3 I have boosted up for additional cycling, but really none of this is necessary. If you have it, that's great, you'll do additional damage, but Ken isn't really here to do damage. Ken is here to stabilize the fight and make sure that we keep a defense break on from the start, and if we lose it, we have a high chance of reestablishing it. His EE doesn't matter, but the artifact, I really do like Warhorn. You can experiment with other artifacts, but much like with Haste, I do not recommend debuff spamming artifacts unless you are running a damage dealer other than Kane. And speaking of Kane, this is our big damage dealer. Kane, you need to put on speed boots. He's got to be relatively fast. I think 150 to 170 speed range is your target, and the rest into damage. For an artifact, you want him on a Lensonox Wrath to cycle his attacks. The reason for the higher speed on Kane in place of the damage is to maintain the defense breaks. We want to make sure that even when he doesn't activate his Rift Fragment and doesn't get those extra attacks, he still cycles around fast enough to maintain the attacks necessary to keep Defense Break on throughout the entire fight, and this speed point really helps. As for Molagora, he's a damage dealing unit. You put all the Molagora you can into him to get as much damage as you can. I'm of course running Grace of Growth, so his S1 is not completed, but this works fine for me. For an artifact, Alen'Sanak's Wrath is darn near required to cycle him, though you can experiment with artifacts like Full Metal's Auto Mail. If you don't have Kane, in his place you can run Jacko, Milim, Sirmia, or even Mercedes, though Mercedes might struggle to give you one-turn clears. Now at the start of the fight, Haste applies his S3 and hopefully gets a defense break. If he does not get a defense break, like shown here, that's fine. Xeon takes the turn before Ken goes. Kane does his S3. Because there's no defense break, we don't do nearly as much damage, but that's okay. We'll be fine. Ken applies his defense break. Now we have a 2-turn defense break up. If Haste had gotten his defense break off, Ken would have still extended it to a 2-turn defense break, and that helps us with the cycling. That's why Ken's speed tuning point is so important, not just for applying the defense break a second time, but also to let him be used in Wyvern 13 as your dual attack unit. Ken applies his S3, which if we had room for it would have given us an attack break, but our bar is already filled up. You can see why we don't really need any debuffing artifacts. Now, like any other Rift fight, we're hoping for these extra attacks from the Rift Fragment.
I will crush you. Eat this.
And you can see we have 4 turns of defense break left. Well, 3 now, but still. We're maintaining that defense break nicely.
Don't you see?
Kane drops his S3, almost 100k damage. I wanted to point out that we are coming up on the halfway point of this fight, and we still have 33 turns left.
Please hurry. It's urgent.
I'll smash you.
About the only way this fight fails is if you do so many extra attacks that your support units, Haste and Ken, die, and then you aren't able to maintain the defense break. So you may want to even consider putting lifesteal on those units to help stabilize it more if you have those issues, but it shouldn't be a problem. Still maintaining 3 turns of defense break.
I'll smash you to pieces. The weak.
Plenty of debuffs on the board. No Cradle of Life needed, no Alabastron needed, no Torn Sleeve needed.
The Hellside will slice you in two.
You're dead. Get a good look at these fists. Fatal strike. Eat this. I'll smash you to pieces.
I want you to watch carefully when Haste uses his S2 here. Watch how much this heals. Bam, is a full team-wide heal. So putting some Mullet into Haste's S2 is very much worth it, and that's part of what makes him so difficult to replace. If you're going to try to run this without Haste, like say for example you want to run Cirilla as in place of Haste, go for it. Just make sure you put Lifesteal on everybody, or perhaps put Touch of Rekos on Hazel as additional forms of healing and survivability. And just like that, the fight is over with 12 turns to spare. So there's my team. Hopefully this helped you guys out. I know I'm really enjoying farming Rift at 1 turn clears. I would say out of 30 runs, I usually get 28 to 29 clears. It's that consistent, and at that level of farming, it makes farming Rift better than farming any hunt. Per stamina, that is. I hope you enjoyed this team, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If so, give it a like, and maybe a subscribe. Have a good one, everybody.